at that moment, I think there's only like 10 minutes left in the movie, and I'm like looking at the runtime like, okay, how are they gonna wrap?
This is a conclave, Aldo. It's not a war.
It is a war.
Drive-by movies, you're watching
fresh releases.
My name's Blaise.
And I'm James.
And this week, we're talking the brand new film, Conclave.
3. And therefore no need for faith.
Conclave is a new film from Edward Berger. It's about Cardinal Lawrence, who is tasked with leading one of the world's most secretive and ancient events, selecting a new pope. And he finds himself at the center of a conspiracy that could shake the very foundation of the Catholic Church. So this is a very interesting concept for something that I do remember actually being very interested in. For those who don't know, I grew up going through Catholic school from grades kindergarten to 8th grade. Interesting aspect or time of my life where made me feel different ways about different things and stuff. But I do always remember one of the lessons about when a pope dies, because Pope John Paul did die. I remember when I was in Catholic school and like selecting a pope was like one of the lessons we learned. And I always remembered it was a big ordeal, involved like, certain smokes that needs to come out of the Vatican in Rome. So seeing it in film was interesting, and I didn't expect this movie to kind of deal with certain conspiracies that, very much are telling of our political ways currently in America, as well as throughout the world too. Blaise, what are your thoughts coming out of Conclave?
Yeah, to kind of elaborate on what you're talking about, I feel like the selection after Pope John Paul's death, Cardinal Benedict, I think, right? Or Pope Benedict.
So. Yeah.
So yeah, like that, I remember, I feel like we were on like a family vacation at the time, and I remember being like engrossed in the selection of the new Pope. And then I remember finally seeing, like, I forget, it was after a certain amount of days, like the white smoke. Is it white or red? I remember there was like a specific, I think it was a white smoke, correct?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, like, so I remember it being like, kind of, this took me back to like being engrossed in that kind of selection of the Pope. I don't remember Pope Francis' selection being as like much of a cultural moment, but I feel like that's probably due to this is all like pre-real, like, not pre-internet, but like internet being such a part of daily life, Yeah. Where it's in your pocket on your phone. And I think that's why like the Benedict selection was probably such a big deal, even though Francis' selection was only like a couple years later because Benedict had to step down, or did step down. I don't remember what happened there, but anyways, getting to Conclave, yeah, this movie was a really tight-knit like thriller. It felt like it was doing a lot of interesting things with this whole like conspiracy element, but it never really went I feel like it was still like a grounded conspiracy. It never went like super crazy conspiracy wise. It all was still like super believable. I think when I saw the poster for this movie, I was expecting it to be like almost like an action film or something, where something was going to go on in the clergy and it would have been insane. But yeah, like I liked that this was super grounded. It kept you on the edge of your seat. As soon as you start this film, you're gonna get sucked in, and really they teach you well about like the elements that are going on in the selection of the Pope and what has to happen. I felt like they did summarize that pretty well, even though I did come in with some knowledge beforehand of how that selection goes down.
Right, yeah. And going in blind to this movie, I mean, I just remember the poster. I was like, I don't know if I'm interested in seeing a Ralph Fiennes movie and Stanley Tucci movie as priests and everything, not knowing that, it was going to be about cardinals and, the corruption within, like, I don't want to say business, but just like this movie is also relatable just because it's stuff that you deal with at, every level of work for the most part. Whenever a manager steps down or, any kind of position, just like, there's always discussions on who wants it, who's deserving of it, who do you get behind your back and supporting and stuff. And seeing it in a movie like this is just like, even though it's something that's relatable, but maybe not relatable like by religious aspects or stuff that you just might be unaware of. It just had something though that there's like a common connection for us, like, everyday, work people too. Just seeing it brought together within this movie was just really interesting. It really like, lets you like breathe and take in just like all this like evil stuff that like you just kind of forget about. I know we've had multiple popes since Pope John passed away and everything, but just I remember it was such a big deal when like a priest like it said that like he was fine with like gay marriage and stuff, like the Bible was written a long time ago. I think that's our current pope or maybe the last pope that said that, and it was such a big thing. But just seeing how there are other popes that don't agree with like moving forward, want to stick with tradition, like it's just stuff you don't think about, and just seeing it on screen with all these cardinals arguing, it was a interesting aspect. So I think like a movie for like this kind of being made about that.
Yeah, I felt like this film had those creative twists and turns that really kept you there, interested. I felt like it was fairly obvious though that the Pope that the Kabul Cardinal was going to become the Pope. I felt like that was like kind of obvious from the start. I don't know if that was too ham-fisted, just because like of course some guy that comes out of nowhere, he's a secret cardinal, is going to become the Pope. It's just getting there, I felt like. And when he gives this like rousing speech toward the end, obviously we're getting into spoilers here, but I'm assuming you've watched the film Conclave. But yeah, when he gives this rousing speech at the end, it's almost like the next vote. Like it's not unanimous, but it seems close enough that I forget the that cardinal's name, but yeah, he becomes the new Pope. But then I was at that moment, I think there was only like 10 minutes left in the movie, and I'm like looking at the runtime like, okay, how are they gonna they wrapped it up in a bow, but there's still 10 minutes left. We're just gonna see him get like the little hat on maybe, or drop into the Pope mobile maybe. But yeah, like they kind of throw this other curveball at you that I wasn't I mean, obviously I don't think anyone's expecting. This curveball is almost insane. I thought it was gonna go into some type of like spotlight ordeal maybe towards the end, and it was gonna get really dark, but it goes another way, which I guess was a breath of fresh air, because you're like, dude, if you drop some spotlight on us, 10 minutes left in the movie, there's not enough there for you to feel like comfortable without it being a dark ending. I mean, obviously it would have been a dark ending regardless, but if you drop that kind of stuff there. But they drop something else that seems to be somewhat, I guess, relevant right now, at least in the popular conversation. But I'm just not sure if it was like the right ending for this movie, being that I don't really know what it was saying, like in a way. Like I mean, there's a final last shot of like the nuns leaving, and you can see they're kind of like elated on the new Pope, but I'm assuming that it was they've heard about what happened with this new Pope and kind of like the circumstances that they were in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say overall, like that's kind of my like, I haven't really said whether or not I like the movie. I loved it, and the movie's kind of shot like, like the normal thriller of like something like Spotlight, or I don't want to say David Fincher, but just like one of those thriller aspect movies. And so I knew that he was going to be a big part of the movie, like, and I thought he was going to have some kind of crazy scandal behind him, and the movie makes it out to seem like it kind of is a scandal when really it's not that big of a deal. I know it would be a big deal to like traditionalists, I guess you can say, but for a movie that was like trying to be forward thinking and pushing the characters of like Stanley Tucci ahead, who is the most forward thinking cardinal, I thought like there wasn't enough conversation towards the end though for a movie that's supposed to be forward thinking, but like we never got the aspect of like the needle drop on like having the conversations with some of the more traditionalist. Tedesco, I think, is like the villain cardinal for the most part. Like we never get to see his reaction to losing and finding the true background of the new Pope and stuff too. Not that it's needed, but for a movie that's advertising forward thinking, I would have liked to have seen that conversation, just being like, this is the direction that the church is heading and stuff. Mm-hmm. So that would be my only complaint. It is a satisfying ending, I'd say, overall still. But for the movie, though, being like so great and then just kind of ending very quickly, like it is wrapped with a nice bow, but just was rushed in the end, I guess you could say. So that's my final complaint on making this movie being great. This is a really good movie, but just like didn't really like, end on that best possibility. Like I wanted more out of this movie, I guess, reaching that ending point.
Definitely. Yeah, I would say for me it's very similar. I thought this whole movie I was, there on the edge of my seat. I was really entwined. I thought the cinematography was great for how almost limited it is, because it's just limited to the Vatican. I know that they rebuilt the whole, like, all the rooms that they needed. Obviously they couldn't shoot in the real Vatican, and they did a great job. Like, the production design, set design is great. I thought that score throughout the movie that's really like pushing it along, I thought that was very iconic almost. It was really well done, even though it seems kind of limited in its capacity. But yeah, I thought that this movie was really well done. It just does feel a little bit towards the end that they were kind of running a little bit out of steam, and they kind of rushed it while also trying to push. It felt like they were trying to push a message, but also not at the same time. So it was a little bit like morally confusing, I guess, towards the end, or at least for me, it felt that way. But yeah, overall, like, I thought this was a really interesting movie, and it definitely came out of left field. It wasn't one that I was on my radar by any means. And even just as somebody who doesn't really look into the promotional material for stuff, but obviously when I'm walking through the theater, I'm looking at all the posters, like, and if I see trailers, I see trailers. I don't even think I did see a trailer for this film, even going to the movie multiple times throughout that window. But yeah, like, I was surprised that this wasn't, I felt like just from the posters that this was going to be a totally different movie than it was. And I'm glad that this was such like a kind of understated thriller that was still very engaging.
Yeah. I know Ralph Fiennes has another movie that's out, and looking at the poster, it just looks like something that is like just good, but just like, is it going to be the Oscar bait movie of the year? And it's way above a lot of those aspects of movies. I highly recommend checking it out because it's great for the performances, and it does have a great story. But yeah, just like I said though, it's just like on the cusp of being great, but just barely misses the mark. Still a really satisfying movie though, that I enjoyed watching, and maybe get a better art director at Focus Features to make better posters or something. I don't know where you can go, but like, you really could have grabbed people's attention by like having like maybe like a stained glass window poster or something, and just like having it look like super like creepy and evil, but like not like a horror film or aspect, but just my thoughts, I guess.
I think the issue with the poster is they went for like the float. It's not a floating heads poster, but it's like a floating bodies. It's kind of like an Avengers style poster, but just with their full bodies. And I think that's where you led into maybe thinking it's like probably more of like an action, or I mean, it's a thriller, but it's very understated compared to what you thought maybe the type of thriller that it was going to be. I think it's mirroring a lot of those kind of very big action movies, like Olympus Has Fallen or something like that. Yeah. That's kind of what it reminded me of, like the poster. And I know if you like look at the poster, you're probably not going to think that that's right on the top of your mind, but it's definitely understated in the way that's the way a lot of those action posters are. They didn't go for the artsy fartsy kind of like maybe just like a silhouette of Ralph Fiennes' face and a cross or something, or like you said, like a stained window. That's definitely the poster that maybe isn't going to grab people's attention, but probably what this film maybe deserved.
Right, yeah. And this is a really hard movie to advertise anyways, in general, I guess you could say, just because who is this movie for? Like, what crowd? Like, I know this movie did well at the box office, but I guess it's just like all people who are fans of the actors, just like, oh, I want to see that new Ralph Fiennes movie. Oh, I want to see that new Stanley Tucci movie, or John Lithgow, whoever it was that you wanted to see in this movie. But this is a movie that I wish I could have saw in Catholic school, just because it is very meaningful. It's not a movie they probably would show us though, just because of some of the drama elements within the movie. Just they don't want us to see that corruption. Probably Catholicism is perfection, and that was my problem with going to that school. But what are your thoughts on the movie? How would you advertise it? What'd you think on the movie? Is it going to win any Oscars? Let us know in the comments below, because that's a great way to help support the show, as well as renting it through our Amazon affiliate link.
And if you guys haven't already, go ahead and smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, and click that notification bell to get all released updates.
And speaking of updates, catch all our social media links down below for Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, as well as our personal Letterboxd accounts. That'll conclude this week's episode. Tune in next week for a brand new video.